If someone had told me she'd pull me close in disguise and make out with me, like the world couldn't touch us, I would have called it a fantasy. Have you ever imagined being so desperate you'd take any job, no matter how strange it sounded? That's exactly where Avery Parker found herself on a cold Tuesday morning in November. She stared at her laptop, the eviction notice crumpled beside an empty coffee cup. 24 years old, an art student, and completely broke. Her fingers shook as she scrolled through listings, each one more disheartening than the last. Waitress roles barely paying minimum wage, cleaning work that wouldn't even cover her rent, and internships that require her to work for free. This is ridiculous, she muttered, running her hands through her messy brown hair. 3 months behind on rent, student loans piling up like a mountain she'd never climb, and her credit cards maxed out. She was drowning, sinking fast, with nothing and no one to throw her a line. She exhaled a shaky breath and kept scrolling, because what else could she do? That's when she saw it. A classified ad that made her stop scrolling immediately. Seeking young woman for unconventional escort services. Must be discreet, adaptable, and willing to follow specific instructions. Compensation: $50,000 for 3 months of work. Serious inquiries only. $50,000. Avery's heart raced. That Amal would solve every single one of her problems. She could pay off her debts, finish her degree, and maybe even have enough left over to pursue her dream of opening her own art gallery. But escort services, her stomach churned. She wasn't naive. She knew what that usually meant. Still, the word unconventional caught her attention. Maybe it was different. Maybe it was just companionship for lonely, rich people. Before she could overthink it, Avery clicked on the contact information and found herself dialing the number. Her hands shook as she pressed each digit. Sterling Enterprises, Vivian speaking. The voice was crisp, professional, with a slight hint of authority that made Avery straighten her posture, even though they weren't face to face. Hi. I'm calling about the classified ad. Avery's voice came out smaller than she intended. There was a pause. Which ad specifically? The one about unconventional escort services. Another pause, longer this time. I see. Can you meet me today at 3 p.m.? Hey, if you're enjoying this story, go ahead and drop a like to help us grow even more. And let me know in the comments on a scale from 0 to 10. What score would you give this story so far? Your feedback makes all the difference. The Regency Crown Downtown Penthouse Suite. Ask for Vivian Sterling. Sterling. Avery recognized that name. It was plastered all over the financial news. The tech Aries worth millions. Always photographed at charity galas with different handsome men on her arm. Yes, I can be there. Avery heard herself saying. Excellent. And Miss Parker. Avery Parker. Miss Parker. Please dress professionally. This is a business meeting, nothing more. We'll discuss the details of the arrangement in person. The line went dead, leaving Avery staring at her phone in disbelief. Had she really just agreed to meet a millionaire about some mysterious job? She spent the next 4 hours preparing, trying on every piece of decent clothing she owned, finally settling on a simple black dress and her only pair of heels that weren't falling apart. Avery stood in front of her cracked mirror. You can do this, she whispered to her reflection. It's just a meeting. Just hear what she has to say. But deep down, as she grabbed her purse and headed toward the door, Avery knew her life was about to change forever. She just had no idea how dramatically. The elevator ride to the Regency Crown felt like a lifetime. Every floor that passed made her heart beat faster. What was she getting herself into? As the elevator dinged and opened to reveal the most luxurious hallway she'd ever seen, Avery took a deep breath and stepped forward. There was no turning back now. Her future, whatever it held, was waiting behind those imposing double doors at the end of the hall. The elevator ride to the top floor of the Regency Crown felt like an eternity. Avery's palms were sweating as she watched the numbers climb higher and higher. When the doors finally opened, she was greeted by a private foyer with marble floors and crystal chandeliers. That probably cost more than her entire education. Miss Parker, a tall, elegant woman, appeared from behind double doors. Vivian Sterling was even more stunning in person than in the magazines. Her dark hair was pulled back in a perfect chignon, and she wore a tailored navy suit that screamed expensive. But it was her eyes that caught Avery's attention. Piercing green eyes that seemed to see right through her. "Yes, that's me," Avery managed to say, trying not to sound as nervous as she felt. "Please come in." Vivian's voice was warm but businesslike as she led Avery into a spacious living room, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The view was breathtaking, but Avery tried to focus on why she was there. "Would you like something to drink? Coffee, tea, water?" Vivian asked, gesturing for Avery to sit on a cream-colored sofa that looked like it belonged in a museum. "Water would be great. Thank you." Avery's mouth was dry, and her hands were still trembling slightly. Vivian poured two glasses of sparkling water from a crystal decanter and sat across from Avery, crossing her legs elegantly. For a moment, they just looked at each other, sizing each other up. "I'm sure you're wondering what this is all about," Vivian finally said, her voice taking on a more serious tone. "The role I'm offering is unusual. It demands absolute discretion and a level of performance not everyone can sustain." Avery nodded, trying to project more confidence than she felt. "I understand. I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Vivian's eyebrows lifted. "Whatever it takes," dangerous words, Miss Parker, especially when you don't yet know the terms. Something in Vivian's expression made Avery's heart stutter. Was it amusement? Intrigue? "Let me be direct," Vivian said, leaning forward. "I need someone to pose as my boyfriend in public at social events, business dinners, charity galas, anywhere the media might be watching." Avery blinked, certain she'd misheard. "Your boyfriend?" "Yes. My family and my company's board hold very traditional views on relationships and marriage. They've pressured me for years to settle down with a suitable man. The attention on my personal life has become a business liability." Vivian rose and crossed to the window, her back to Avery. "I need someone who can play the part convincingly, dress like a man, act like a man, make everyone believe Vivian Sterling has finally found her Prince Charming." The room was quiet save for the soft hum of the air conditioning. Avery felt the world tilt. This was not what she'd expected. "But I'm a woman," she said, plain and small. Vivian turned, a faint smile at the corners of her mouth. "Exactly. That's what makes this arrangement perfect. You have no romantic interest in me, and I have none in you. It's strictly business. Clean, simple, no complications." Yet when Vivian's eyes met hers, something fluttered in Avery's chest that was anything but simple. There was an intensity in Vivian's gaze that left her feeling exposed, vulnerable. "You would need to cut your hair, adjust your walk and voice, study men's fashion and behavior. It won't be easy," Vivian continued. "In return, you'd receive $50,000, plus a clothing allowance and access to the best stylists and coaches money can buy." Avery's thoughts raced. $50,000 to pretend to be a man and publicly date one of the most beautiful women she had ever seen. It sounded insane, impossible, and yet why me? Avery asked. "Why not hire a professional actor or someone with experience?" Vivian sat back down closer this time, so close that Avery could smell her perfume. Something expensive and intoxicating because actors are too recognizable, and professionals in this line of work often have complications. You're perfect because you're unknown. You need the money badly enough to be committed. And Vivian paused, studying Avery's face carefully. And you have the right bone structure. With the right styling, you could easily pass for a handsome young man. Avery felt heat rise to her cheeks under Vivian's scrutiny. The way this woman looked at her was doing things to her pulse that she didn't want to analyze too closely. "I need an answer today," Vivian said softly, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "The contract would be for 3 months. 3 months of pretending to be my devoted boyfriend, and then we go our separate ways. No strings attached, no complications." Avery's throat felt dry despite the water she had been sipping. 3 months seemed like both an eternity and no time at all. What if someone finds out? She managed to ask. What if we get caught? Vivian's smile was confident, almost predatory. That won't happen. I have the best people working for me. Hairstylists, makeup artists, voice coaches, personal trainers. By the time they're done with you, even your own mother wouldn't recognize you. The confidence in Vivian's voice was both reassuring and terrifying. This woman was used to getting what she wanted, used to controlling every aspect of her world. And now she wanted Avery to be part of that world. I need to think about it, Avery said, though even as the words left her mouth, she knew what her answer would be. She couldn't afford to think about it. She couldn't afford to say no. Vivian nodded slowly as if she had expected this response. Of course, but I need your answer by tomorrow morning. If you decide to accept, we start immediately. Time is not a luxury we have. She stood up gracefully and walked to a side table, retrieving an elegant business card. My private number, she said, pressing the card into Avery's hand. Their fingers touched briefly, and Avery felt an electric shock run up her arm. Vivian seemed to notice it, too, her eyes flickering with something unreadable. Call me tomorrow before 9 a.m. with your decision. As Avery stood to leave, Vivian's voice stopped her at the door. Miss Parker, for what it's worth, I hope you say yes. I have a feeling this arrangement could be beneficial for both of us. The way Vivian said beneficial made Avery's cheeks burn again. As she stepped back into the elevator, Avery clutched the business card so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The doors closed and she found herself staring at her reflection in the polished metal. In less than 24 hours, she would have to decide whether to transform her entire life. Her entire identity for 3 months of pretending to love a woman who was already making her feel things she didn't understand. The elevator descended, taking her back to her old life. But Avery knew there was no going back. Whether she said yes or no, everything had already changed. The question was no longer if she would accept Vivian's proposal, but whether she was brave enough to admit it to herself. That night, Avery lay awake staring at the ceiling. Vivian's business card sat on her nightstand, seeming to glow in the darkness. Every time she closed her eyes, she could see those piercing green eyes studying her, analyzing her like a work of art. The way Vivian had looked at her when their fingers touched, it had sent shivers down her spine that she was still trying to understand. At 6 a.m., Avery's phone rang. It was her landlord, Mr. Callahan, his voice gruff and impatient. Parker, I need an answer today. Either you have the rent money by 5 p.m. or you're out by tomorrow morning. The call ended abruptly, leaving Avery staring at the phone. That was it. The decision had been made for her. With trembling fingers, she dialed Vivian's private number. I was wondering when you'd call. Vivian's voice came through smooth and confident. I accept, Avery said without preamble. Good. Meet me at Salon Rouge on 5th Avenue at 10 a.m. Ask for Nico. He's expecting you. Wait, what exactly? But the line was already dead. 2 hours later, Avery found herself standing outside one of the most exclusive salons in the city. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see stylists working on clients who looked like they belonged in fashion magazines. Her own reflection looked so out of place that she almost turned around and walked away. You must be Avery, a voice said behind her. She turned to see a tall, impeccably dressed man with silver hair and kind eyes. I'm Nico. Vivian told me all about our special project. Inside the salon, Nico led her to a private room in the back. Now, darling, I need you to trust me completely. What we're about to do is going to be dramatic, but Vivian assured me you're brave enough to handle it. Avery nodded, though her heart was pounding. What exactly are we doing? We're creating a den, Nico said with a flourish. Vivian's new boyfriend. Sit down and let the magic begin. For the next 4 hours, Avery watched in the mirror as her entire identity disappeared. Nico cut her long brown hair into a stylish masculine cut, shaped her eyebrows, and taught her how to apply subtle makeup that would make her features appear more angular. The key, Nico explained as he worked, is in the details. The way you hold your shoulders, how you walk, even how you breathe. Men take up space differently than women. A voice coach arrived next, a stern woman named Elaine Porter, who spent hours teaching Avery to lower her voice and change her speech patterns. Men speak from their chest, not their throat, Elaine Porter instructed, and they use fewer words to express themselves. Less emotional inflection. By 300 p.m., Avery barely recognized herself. The person staring back from the mirror was undeniably handsome in a boyish way. With the right clothes, she could easily pass for a young man in his early 20s. Magnificent, came Vivian's voice from behind them. Avery spun around to see Vivian entering the room, and the look in her eyes made Avery's breath catch. It was appreciation, but something deeper, too, something that made her pulse race. "You look perfect," Vivian said softly, her gaze traveling from Avery's newly styled hair down to her feet. "How do you feel?" "Strange," Avery admitted, her new, deeper voice surprising even herself. "Like, I'm wearing a costume that I can't take off." Vivian stepped closer, close enough that Avery could smell that intoxicating perfume again. "You'll get used to it. Now comes the real test." She handed Avery a garment bag. "Get changed. We have dinner reservations at La Bernardini in 2 hours." Avery's eyes widened. El Bernardini was one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city tonight, but I don't know how to. "You'll learn," Vivian interrupted. "Sink or swim, Aiden. From this moment on, that's who you are." In the changing room, Avery opened the garment bag to find a perfectly tailored black suit, crisp white shirt, and expensive Italian leather shoes. Everything fit as if it had been made specifically for her body. When she emerged, Vivian's expression was unreadable. "Turn around," Vivian commanded softly. Avery obeyed, feeling those green eyes examining every detail. "Perfect. Now give me your hand." When Avery extended her hand, Vivian took it and placed it on her own waist. The contact sent electricity through both of them, and Avery saw Vivian's eyes widen slightly in surprise. "This is how you'll hold me when we're in public," Vivian said, though her voice was slightly breathless, confident, possessive, but respectful. Avery's hand trembled against Vivian's waist. Through the thin fabric of her dress, she could feel the warmth of Vivian's skin, and it was doing things to her that she definitely shouldn't be feeling like this. Avery asked, her new voice husky. Vivian nodded, but didn't step away. Instead, she placed her own hand on Avery's chest over her heart. "Your heart is racing," she observed. "So is mine," Avery whispered before she could stop herself. For a moment, they stood frozen, staring into each other's eyes. The air between them crackled with tension that had nothing to do with their business arrangement. Vivian was the first to break away, clearing her throat and taking a step back. "We should go," she said, though her cheeks were flushed. "Our reservation is in an hour, and you need to practice walking in those shoes." As they left the salon together, Avery caught their reflection in the window. They looked like the perfect couple, a handsome young man and a beautiful, sophisticated woman. But the way Vivian's hand trembled slightly as it rested on Avery's arm suggested that the lines between pretense and reality were already beginning to blur. The restaurant was exactly as intimidating as Avery had expected. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, and waiters moving with balletic precision. Vivian guided her to their table with a possessive hand at the small of her back, and Avery was surprised by how natural it felt. "Remember," Vivian murmured as they sat, "you're confident, successful, and completely infatuated with me. Can you handle that?" Avery looked across at Vivian, who looked even more beautiful in the candlelight, and realized the last part wouldn't require any acting at all. "I think I can manage," she said, and for the first time since this wild arrangement began, she smiled for real. Vivian smiled back, eyes glittering with something that looked dangerously like real affection. And Avery wondered if they were already in much deeper water than either had planned. The waiter approached, and Vivian reached across to take Avery's hand. "Darling," she said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear, "I'm so glad we could finally have this night together." The word darling sent a shiver through Avery, and from the slow sweep of Vivian's thumb over her knuckles, she suspected Vivian felt it, too. 3 months had never seemed both so long and so impossibly short. The next morning, Avery woke in her cramped apartment feeling like a different person. The expensive suit hung carefully in her closet. The business card with Vivian's private number seemed to burn on the nightstand. Her reflection still startled her, the masculine cut, the subtle changes that made her look like a stranger. At exactly 8 a.m., her phone buzzed. "Good morning, Aiden," Vivian said, crisp and professional. "I hope you practiced your new voice last night. We have our first official appearance this afternoon. Where are we going?" Avery asked, focusing on keeping her voice low and even. "The Metropolitan Museum's charity luncheon. 300 of New York's most influential people will be there, including several board members and at least a dozen reporters." Avery's stomach dropped. "Reporters? Vivian, I don't think I'm ready for." "You're ready," Vivian cut in, firm. "Trevor will pick you up at noon. Wear the navy suit from yesterday's fittings." Trevor turned out to be Vivian's personal driver, a middle-aged man with kind eyes who didn't ask questions. When Avery slid into the back of the black Mercedes, the drive to the museum felt like a journey to her execution. When they arrived, Vivian was already waiting at the entrance, stunning in an emerald green dress that made her eyes look even more incredible. "You look nervous," she observed as Avery approached. "Relax your shoulders. Remember your posture." Before Avery could respond, Vivian slipped her arm through Avery's and leaned into her as if they'd been together for years. The contact sent familiar electricity through Avery's body. "Just follow my lead," Vivian whispered, her breath warm against Avery's ear. "And remember, you're madly in love with me." The next 2 hours were a blur of handshakes, small talk, and carefully orchestrated displays of affection. Vivian played her part perfectly, gazing at Avery with what looked like genuine adoration whenever someone was watching. Avery found herself getting lost in those green eyes, forgetting sometimes that it was all an act. "Aiden works in sustainable technology," Vivian told a group of business executives. "He's passionate about environmental innovation." Avery nodded, remembering the backstory they'd rehearsed. "It's important that companies take responsibility for their environmental impact," she said, proud that her voice remained steady and masculine. "Vivian's leadership in this area is one of the things I admire most about her." Vivian's hand found Avery's arm, squeezing gently. The approval in her eyes made Avery's heart race. "And this is Beatrice Langford," Vivian said, introducing Avery to an elderly woman dripping in diamonds. "She's on the board of directors for Sterling Technologies." Beatrice's sharp eyes studied Avery carefully. "So, you're the young man who's captured our Vivian's heart. She's been quite secretive about you." "I prefer to keep my private life private," Avery replied, channeling the confidence she'd been practicing. "Vivian is worth protecting from unnecessary media attention." "How romantic," Beatrice said, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. "And what are your intentions with our Vivian?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Avery felt Vivian tense beside her. "I intend to make her happy," Avery said simply. "For as long as she'll have me." The sincerity in her own voice surprised her. Vivian's eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, Avery forgot they had an audience. "How lovely," Beatrice finally said. "Vivian, dear, you've chosen well." As Beatrice walked away, Vivian pulled Avery aside behind a marble column. "That was perfect," she breathed. "You are so convincing that I almost believed it myself." They were standing close, too close for just business partners. Avery could see the golden flecks in Vivian's green eyes, could count the freckles on her nose. "Maybe I was convincing because I meant it," Avery said before she could stop herself. Vivian's breath hitched. Aiden, we can't. This is just business, Avery finished. I know. But that doesn't change how I feel when you look at me like that. How do I look at you? Vivian asked, her voice barely a whisper. Like you're seeing me. The real me. Not the costume. Not the act. Me. Vivian's hand rose to touch Avery's cheek, then stopped halfway as if remembering where they were. This is dangerous, she whispered. Feeling this way. It wasn't part of the plan. Before Avery could respond, a flash went off nearby. They turned to see a photographer lowering his camera, grinning. Perfect shot, he called out. The new couple everyone's talking about. Vivian immediately stepped back, putting appropriate distance between them. But the damage was done. The moment had been captured, and more importantly, they both knew that what they had felt had been real. For the rest of the event, they maintained their roles flawlessly. But Avery couldn't stop thinking about the look in Vivian's eyes when she'd almost touched her face. It had been tender, vulnerable, and completely unguarded. As Trevor drove them back into the city, Vivian sat on the opposite side of the car, staring out the window. Tomorrow we have dinner with my parents, she said without looking at Avery. They're flying in from Boston specifically to meet you. Avery's blood ran cold. Your parents, Vivian? What if they won't suspect anything? Vivian said, finally turning to look at her. My mother has been begging me to bring someone home for years. She'll be so thrilled that she won't look too closely. But there was something in Vivian's expression that suggested she was trying to convince herself. As much as Avery. There's something else, Vivian continued. The dinner is at my penthouse. You'll need to stay the night. Stay the night. Avery's voice cracked slightly. They're expecting us to they think we're a couple, Vivian finished. Which means they'll expect us to share a bedroom. The air in the car suddenly felt thick and charged. Avery could feel her pulse in her throat. I'll sleep on the couch, she managed to say. Vivian's laugh was hollow. My mother will want a tour of the apartment. She'll notice if there are sheets on the living room sofa. They rode the rest of the way in silence, both lost in their own thoughts. When the car stopped outside Avery's building, Vivian finally spoke. Aiden. Avery turned to look at her. Yes. What we felt back there at the museum. We can't let it happen again. It's too dangerous for both of us. Avery nodded, though her heart felt like it was breaking. I understand. But as she walked up to her apartment, Avery realized that understanding something and being able to control it were two very different things. Tomorrow, she would have to share a bed with the woman who was already making her question everything she thought she knew about herself. 3 months had never seemed so impossible to survive. The next evening, Avery stood outside Vivian's penthouse building, clutching a bouquet of white roses that Vivian had instructed her to bring. Her hands were shaking so badly, she could barely hold the flowers steady. Everything about tonight felt like walking into a minefield blindfolded. The elevator ride to Vivian's floor seemed to take forever. When the doors opened, Vivian was waiting and Avery's breath caught in her throat. She was wearing a simple black cocktail dress that somehow made her look even more beautiful than usual. You look terrified, Vivian observed, straightening Avery's tie. My parents are going to love you. What if they ask questions I can't answer? What if they want to know about my family, my background? Avery's voice was tight with anxiety. I've prepared answers for everything, Vivian assured her. But Avery noticed that her hands were trembling slightly, too. Remember, we've been dating for 6 months. We met at a tech conference in Silvergate. You're originally from Northport, studied at Stanford, and you're passionate about renewable energy. Vivian's penthouse was breathtaking with panoramic views of the city and furnishings that looked like they belonged in a museum. But Avery barely noticed the luxury because her attention was immediately drawn to the couple, standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows. Gregory Sterling was exactly what Avery had expected. Tall, distinguished, with silver hair and an expensive suit. But it was Vivian's mother who surprised her. Helen Sterling was petite and elegant with Vivian's same green eyes and a warm smile. That immediately put Avery at ease. "You must be Aiden," Helen said, crossing the room with her arms outstretched. "I'm so happy to finally meet you. Vivian has told us so much about you." Avery accepted Helen's embrace, surprised by the genuine warmth in it. "It's wonderful to meet you, too, Mrs. Sterling. Vivian speaks about you constantly." "Please call me Helen," she said, stepping back to study Avery's face. "And these flowers are lovely. Vivian always did prefer white roses." Vivian appeared at Avery's side, slipping her arm around Avery's waist in a gesture that was becoming disturbingly natural. "Shall we have dinner? I know you must be hungry after the flight from Boston." Dinner was an elaborate affair. 4 courses served on china so delicate Avery was afraid to touch it. Gregory dominated the conversation at first, discussing business and politics with the confidence of someone accustomed to being heard. But it was Helen who asked the personal questions that made Avery's heart race. "Tell me about your family, Aiden," Helen said over the soup course. "Are your parents still in Northport?" Avery had rehearsed this answer dozens of times, but sitting across from Vivian's mother made her throat feel dry. "My parents passed away in a car accident when I was in college," she said quietly. "I don't have any siblings." It wasn't entirely a lie. Avery's father had died when she was young, though her mother was very much alive. But the story explained why there wouldn't be any family meetings or background checks. Helen's expression softened immediately. "Oh, you poor dear. I'm so sorry. That must have been incredibly difficult." Vivian's hand found Avery's under the table, squeezing gently. The contact sent familiar electricity up Avery's arm, but this time it felt like comfort rather than attraction. "It was," Avery said, "but it taught me to appreciate the people who matter, like Vivian." The sincerity in her own voice surprised her again. When she looked at Vivian, she saw something in those green eyes that made her chest tighten. Tenderness mixed with something that looked dangerously like real affection. "How did you know Vivian was the one?" Helen asked, leaning forward with the eagerness of a mother who had been waiting years for this conversation. Avery felt Vivian tense beside her. This question hadn't been in their rehearsals. "I think it was the way she laughed," Avery said slowly, drawing on memories of their brief time together. "The first time I heard her really laugh. Not the polite laugh she uses in business meetings, but her real laugh. I knew I wanted to spend the rest of my life making her do it." Vivian's grip on her hand tightened. When Avery looked at her, Vivian's eyes were suspiciously bright. "That's beautiful," Helen said, dabbing at her own eyes with her napkin. "Gregory, isn't that beautiful?" Gregory, who had been quiet during this exchange, fixed Avery with a sharp stare. "And what are your intentions of my daughter, Aiden?" The question was delivered with the weight of a man who had built an empire and wasn't easily fooled. Avery straightened in her chair, meeting Gregory's gaze directly. "I want to make her happy, sir, for as long as she'll let me." "That's a diplomatic answer," Gregory observed. "I prefer direct ones. Do you love my daughter?" The room fell silent except for the soft clink of crystal and china. Avery felt Vivian's hand tremble in hers. This was the moment that could destroy everything. One wrong word, one false note, and their entire charade would crumble. But as Avery looked at Vivian, seeing the vulnerability in her eyes, the way she was holding her breath, waiting for the answer, Avery realized that the truth was simpler and more terrifying than any lie. "Yes," Avery said quietly. "I love her more than I ever thought possible." Vivian's sharp intake of breath was audible. Her eyes searched Avery's face as if looking for some sign that it was just part of the act. But Avery held her gaze steadily, letting Vivian see the truth that she was only just admitting to herself. "Good," Gregory said, his stern expression softening slightly, "because my daughter deserves someone who loves her completely. Not her money, not her connections, but her." "I couldn't care less about her money," Avery said. And this time, she was looking directly at Vivian. "The woman I fell in love with is brilliant, funny, generous, and strong enough to run a company, but gentle enough to worry about a stranger's problems. That's who I love. Helen was crying openly now, and even Gregory looked moved. But it was Vivian's reaction that mattered most to Avery. Tears were streaming down Vivian's face as she stared at Avery with an expression of wonder and terror. After dinner, Helen insisted on giving Avery a tour of the penthouse while Vivian and Gregory talked business in the study. She's never brought anyone home before, Helen confided as they walked through Vivian's home office. Oh, there have been men she's dated for the cameras, but she's never brought anyone to meet us. Avery's chest tightened. She's very private. She is, Helen agreed. But the way she looks at you, I've never seen her so happy. And the way you look at her. She paused, studying Avery's face carefully. You really do love her, don't you? More than anything, Avery admitted, the words coming out before she could stop them. When Vivian's parents finally left around midnight, Avery and Vivian stood in the foyer, suddenly alone and intensely aware of what came next. They had to share Vivian's bedroom, had to maintain the illusion even though no one was watching anymore. You are incredible tonight, Vivian said softly. My parents adore you. Your mother is wonderful, Avery replied. I can see where you get your warmth. They stood there for a long moment, neither wanting to address the elephant in the room. Finally, Vivian cleared her throat. I should show you to the bedroom. I mean, our bedroom. Vivian's bedroom was as elegant as the rest of the penthouse with a king-sized bed that suddenly seemed both enormous and far too small. I can sleep on the floor, Avery offered. Don't be ridiculous, Vivian said, but her voice was unsteady. We're both adults. We can share a bed for one night. As they prepared for sleep, changing in the bathroom separately and maintaining careful distance, Avery couldn't stop thinking about the moment at dinner when she'd confessed her love. She had meant every word, and from Vivian's reaction, she suspected Vivian knew it. When they finally got into bed, staying on opposite sides like there was an invisible wall between them, the silence was deafening. Aiden, Vivian's voice was small in the darkness. Yes. When you said you loved me tonight, did you mean it? Avery's heart stopped. This was the moment of truth, the point of no return. She could lie, could pretend it was just part of the act, and maybe preserve what was left of their business arrangement. Or she could tell the truth and risk everything. Yes, Avery whispered. I meant every word. She heard Vivian's breath hitch, felt the mattress shift as Vivian turned toward her in the darkness. This changes everything, Vivian said quietly. I know. We agreed this was just business. I know. If we cross this line, there's no going back. I know. In the darkness, Avery felt Vivian's hand find hers across the vast expanse of the bed. Their fingers intertwined, and Avery felt like she could breathe again for the first time all night. I'm scared, Vivian admitted. So am I. They lay there in the darkness, holding hands like teenagers, both knowing that everything had changed, but neither brave enough yet to say what came next. Tomorrow, they would have to figure out how to navigate this new reality, how to balance their fake relationship with the very real feelings that were threatening to consume them both. But tonight, it was enough to lie in the darkness and hold hands with the person who had somehow become the most important thing in their world. The next morning, Avery woke up to find Vivian already gone from the bed. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and the smell of coffee drifted from the kitchen. For a moment, Avery lay still, remembering the feeling of Vivian's hand in hers through the night. The whispered confessions in the darkness. Everything felt different now, charged with a new kind of electricity that had nothing to do with their business arrangement. Avery found Vivian in the kitchen, still in her silk pajamas, staring out at the city skyline with a cup of coffee in her hands. She looked beautiful and vulnerable in the morning light, her dark hair falling in waves around her shoulders. Good morning, Avery said softly, not wanting to startle her. Vivian turned, and Avery saw the uncertainty in her green eyes. Morning. I made coffee. The normality of the gesture felt surreal after everything that had happened. Avery poured herself a cup, acutely aware of every movement, every breath in the space between them. "About last night," Vivian began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. "I think we need to talk about what this means for our arrangement." Avery's heart sank. Here it was, the conversation where Vivian would remind her that this was all just business, that her confession had been a mistake. "I understand if you want to end the contract," Avery said quietly. "I crossed a line, and I know," Vivian interrupted, setting down her coffee cup with shaking hands. "That's not what I want. That's the problem." She turned to face Avery fully, and the intensity in her eyes made Avery's breath catch. "Aiden, I haven't been able to stop thinking about what you said about loving me. And the terrifying thing is," Vivian's voice dropped to a whisper, "I think I'm falling in love with you, too." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and danger. Avery set down her own cup before she could drop it. "Vivian, I know it's crazy," Vivian continued, her words coming faster now, as if she needed to get them all out before she lost her nerve. "I know it complicates everything, but when I woke up this morning and saw you sleeping beside me, I didn't want to pretend anymore. I didn't want this to be fake." Avery took a step closer, close enough to see the golden flecks in Vivian's eyes. "Then don't pretend. Not with me." Vivian's hand rose to touch Avery's cheek, the gesture she had started at the museum, but hadn't finished. This time, she didn't stop. Her palm was warm against Avery's skin, and Avery leaned into the touch instinctively. "This changes everything," Vivian whispered. "I know," Avery said, covering Vivian's hand with her own. "Are you sure you're ready for that?" Instead of answering with words, Vivian stepped closer, closing the distance between them. Her free hand came up to rest on Avery's chest over her heart. "I've never been sure of anything in my life," she admitted, "but I'm sure of this. I'm sure of you." The kiss happened slowly, tentatively at first. Vivian's lips were soft and warm, and she tasted like coffee and something indefinably sweet. Avery's arms came up to wrap around Vivian's waist, pulling her closer, and Vivian melted into the embrace with a soft sigh that made Avery's heart race. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Vivian's cheeks were flushed and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I never expected this," she whispered against Avery's lips. "I never expected you." "Neither did I," Avery admitted. "But I'm not sorry it happened." Vivian smiled, the first genuine, unguarded smile Avery had ever seen from her. It was radiant, transforming her entire face. "My parents loved you, you know," she said, her arms still around Avery's neck. "My mother called this morning to tell me how wonderful you are." "What did you tell her?" "That she was right," Vivian said simply. "That you're wonderful and that I'm lucky to have you." The words should have been part of their act, but Avery could hear the truth in them. This wasn't for show anymore. It was real. Both their phones buzzed at once, slicing through the moment. Vivian stepped back to check her screen, her expression shifting in an instant. "What is it?" Avery asked, recognizing the professional concern replacing Vivian's softness. "Remember the photographer from the museum?" Vivian held up her phone. "We're on the front page of the society section," Vivian Sterling's mystery man finally revealed. Avery read over her shoulder, stomach dropping at the photo, Vivian looking up at Avery with open adoration, Avery gazing down with unmistakable tenderness. The caption crowed, "Sources close to the couple say they've never seen Sterling so happy." "This is good, right?" Avery ventured. "Public proof of our relationship." "Yes," Vivian said, scrolling, her frown deepening. "But it's also more attention than I expected. I already have 3 interview requests. And my publicist says there are photographers outside the building." As if on cue, her phone rang. Vivian sighed at the caller ID. "It's my publicist. I have to take this." Avery listened to fragments: media strategy, exclusive interview, damage control. When Vivian hung up, her face was troubled. "What's wrong?" Avery asked. Beatrice Langford, the board member from yesterday, has requested a private dinner with us tomorrow night. She wants to get to know us better. Vivian made air quotes. Apparently our performance wasn't convincing enough for her. I slid through Avery's veins. Beatrice had been skeptical from the start. What does that mean? It means we need to be more convincing, Vivian said, grim. Beatrice has sway with the board. If she decides you're not suitable or worse, suspects something isn't right about us, it could create serious problems for the company. The weight of reality crashed down on Avery. For a few precious hours, she had allowed herself to believe that what was happening between them was simple, that love could conquer the complicated web they had woven. But they weren't just to people falling in love. They were to women trapped in a lie that was becoming more dangerous by the day. So, what do we do? Avery asked. Vivian moved to the window, looking down at the street below, where Avery could now see several photographers with long lens cameras pointed up at the building. We give them a show, Vivian said, her voice taking on the cold, professional tone Avery recognized from their first meeting. We become the perfect couple that no one could possibly doubt. But as Vivian turned back to face Avery, the vulnerability in her eyes betrayed her composed exterior. The question is, can we do that without losing ourselves in the process? Avery joined Vivian at the window, slipping her arms around Vivian's waist from behind. She felt Vivian relax against her, and for a moment, they were just two women in love watching the city wake up below them. We'll figure it out, Avery said, pressing a soft kiss to Vivian's temple. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. Vivian turned in Avery's arms, reaching up to trace Avery's jawline with gentle fingers. Promise me something, she whispered. Promise me that no matter how complicated this gets, no matter what we have to do to maintain appearances, you won't forget that this is real. What we feel for each other, it's real. Avery captured Vivian's hand and pressed it against her heart. I promise. But you have to promise me the same thing. I promise, Vivian whispered and sealed it with a kiss that tasted like forever and felt like a vow. Outside, the photographers continued their vigil, unaware that the couple they were watching had just made a pact that would either save them or destroy them both. Tomorrow, they would face Beatrice Langford's scrutiny. But today, for just a few more hours, they could pretend that love was enough to overcome any obstacle. As Vivian led Avery back to the bedroom, their hands intertwined, Avery realized that she would do anything to protect what they had found together. The question was whether Vivian would be willing to do the same. When the time came to choose between love and everything she had worked her entire life to build, Beatrice Langford's private dining room at the exclusive Club Metropolitan felt more like an interrogation chamber than a social gathering. The older woman sat across from Avery and Vivian, her sharp eyes missing nothing as she studied every gesture, every glance between them. Avery could feel sweat beading on her forehead despite the air conditioning, and she fought to keep her masculine posture relaxed and confident. Vivian's hand rested on Avery's thigh under the white linen tablecloth, her fingers tense with anxiety. They had spent the entire day rehearsing answers to potential questions, practicing their body language, perfecting the subtle touches and glances that would convince anyone watching that they were genuinely in love. But Beatrice Langford wasn't just anyone. She was a woman who had built her fortune by reading people, by spotting weakness and deception from a mile away. Tell me, Aiden, Beatrice said, cutting into her perfectly prepared salmon with surgical precision. What do you think of Vivian's work with sustainable technology initiatives? Avery had memorized every detail of Vivian's professional achievements, but the way Beatrice asked the question felt like a trap. I think Vivian's vision for environmental responsibility in tech is revolutionary, Avery replied, keeping her voice steady and deep. She's not just talking about change, she's implementing it. The carbon-neutral data centers, the renewable energy partnerships. She's setting the standard for the entire industry. Beatrice nodded slowly, but her expression remained neutral. And how does someone in your position keep up with such an ambitious woman? It must be challenging to match her intellectual curiosity. The question hit like a physical blow. Avery felt Vivian's fingers tighten on her leg, offering silent support. This was the heart of Beatrice's suspicion. The doubt that someone like Avery could truly be Vivian's equal. I don't try to match Vivian, Avery said carefully. I compliment her. She challenges me to think bigger, to see possibilities I never considered. And I hope I bring her a sense of grounding. Someone who sees her not just as the CEO or the eyes, but as the woman who gets excited about small, sustainable victories and stays up until 300 a.m. reading research papers. Vivian's sharp intake of breath was barely audible, but Avery caught it. The description was too specific, too intimate to be fabricated, and Beatrice noticed. How lovely, Beatrice said, though her tone remained skeptical. Vivian, dear, you seem quite taken with your young man. How do you know this isn't just infatuation? Vivian's response was immediate and fierce. Because he sees me, she said simply, when everyone else sees the sterling name or the company stock price. Aiden sees me struggling with a difficult decision or celebrating a small success. He knows that I put honey in my coffee when I'm stressed, that I read mystery novels when I can't sleep, that Vivian paused, her voice becoming softer, that I've been lonely for so long. I forgot what it felt like to have someone truly care about my happiness. The raw honesty in Vivian's voice made Avery's chest tight. These weren't rehearsed lines. Vivian was revealing real vulnerabilities, real truths about herself that she had never shared before. Beatrice's expression finally shifted, the skeptical mask cracking slightly. And what about your family, Aiden? Surely they have opinions about you dating someone so prominent. This was the question Avery had been dreading. Their fabricated backstory about her parents' death had worked with Vivian's parents. But Beatrice's research capabilities were legendary. My parents would have loved Vivian, Avery said quietly. They always taught me that character matters more than status. They would have seen what I see. Someone who works harder than anyone I know, who carries the weight of thousands of employees' livelihoods on her shoulders, but still has the kindness to worry about a stranger's problems. Beatrice leaned back in her chair, studying Avery with new interest. You speak about them in past tense. They died when I was in college, Avery said, the well-rehearsed sadness in her voice completely genuine now, because she was thinking about the father she had actually lost. It's part of why Vivian means so much to me. When you've lost family, you learn to recognize when someone becomes family. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken emotions. Beatrice's eyes moved between Avery and Vivian, taking in the way Vivian's free hand had moved to rest over her heart, the way Avery's thumb stroked comfortingly across Vivian's knuckles. There's something different about you, too, Beatrice finally said, and Avery's heart stopped. This was it. They had been discovered. Their elaborate charade was over. I've watched Vivian navigate the dating scene for years, Beatrice continued. Beautiful men who wanted her money, ambitious men who wanted her connections, intelligent men who wanted her influence. But I've never seen her look at any of them the way she looks at you. Avery felt Vivian's hand tremble under hers. How does she look at me? Avery asked, genuinely curious despite the danger of the moment. Beatrice smiled, the first genuine expression Avery had seen from her all evening. Like you're her anchor in a storm. Like your home. The words hit Avery like lightning. She turned to look at Vivian and saw tears gathering in those green eyes. Saw an expression of wonder and terror and hope all mixed together. And you, Beatrice said, turning her attention to Avery. You look at her like she hung the moon and stars just for you. The accusation was delivered gently, but it felt like the most dangerous moment of the entire evening because it was true. Avery did look at Vivian like that and everyone could see it. Because she did, Avery said simply, too moved by the moment to remember to be careful. She saved my life in ways she doesn't even know. Beatrice's smile widened. Well then, she said, raising her wine glass, I think this calls for a toast. To Vivian and Aiden. May you continue to see in each other what the rest of us are only beginning to recognize. As they clinked glasses, Avery felt a rush of relief so intense it was almost dizzying. They had passed Beatrice's test, but not through deception or careful acting. They had passed because what they felt for each other was so genuine, so obvious that even someone as perceptive as Beatrice Langford couldn't doubt it. The dinner continued for another hour, but the atmosphere had completely changed. Beatrice regaled them with stories of her own late husband, advice about navigating public relationships, and gentle warnings about the pressures that would come with their growing media attention. The board meeting is next week, Beatrice said as they prepared to leave. I'll be giving my full endorsement of your relationship, Vivian. Your Aden is quite remarkable. Outside the restaurant, Vivian and Avery walked to their car in comfortable silence. It wasn't until they were safely inside with the doors closed that Vivian spoke. We did it, she breathed. She believes us completely. Yes, Avery agreed, but her voice was quiet, thoughtful. Vivian, everything I said in there about seeing you, about you being home, I meant every word. Vivian turned to face Avery Foley, her eyes bright in the dim light of the car's interior. I know. That's what made it so convincing. That's what made it so terrifying. Avery reached over to cup Vivian's face gently. Why terrifying? Because Beatrice was right, Vivian whispered. You are my anchor. You have become home, and that means I have everything to lose now. The vulnerability in Vivian's voice broke Avery's heart. She leaned forward, pressing their foreheads together. You're not going to lose me, she promised. Whatever comes next, whatever challenges we face, you're not going to lose me. Vivian's lips found Avery's in the darkness of the car. A kiss that tasted like promises and felt like a commitment deeper than any contract they had ever signed. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. Take me home, Vivian whispered against Avery's lips. Our home. As their driver pulled away from the curb, Avery realized that somewhere in the space between pretending to love Vivian and actually loving her, they had created something real and precious and worth fighting for. The question was no longer whether their feelings were genuine. Beatrice Langford had seen to that. The question now was whether they were brave enough to build a real life together, when their foundation was built on a lie that was becoming more dangerous every day. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests of their relationship and their resolve. But tonight, they had each other, and for the first time since this whole elaborate charade began, that felt like enough. The morning of the board meeting arrived with gray skies and an atmosphere thick with tension. Avery stood in front of Vivian's bedroom mirror, adjusting her tie for the 5th time, while Vivian paced behind her in a sharp black power suit that made her look every inch the formidable CEO she was. You don't have to come, Vivian said for the 3rd time, though her voice betrayed how much she needed Avery there. The board meetings can be brutal, and if they start asking personal questions. I'm coming, Avery said firmly, turning from the mirror to catch Vivian's hands and still her nervous movement. We're in this together, remember? Besides, Beatrice will be expecting to see your devoted boyfriend supporting you. Vivian's smile was shaky, but genuine. My devoted girlfriend, you mean? The word still sent shivers through Avery every time Vivian said it. Over the past week, they had stopped pretending, even to themselves. Behind closed doors, Vivian was her girlfriend, and Avery had never been happier or more terrified in her life. Right, Avery said, leaning down to press a soft kiss to Vivian's lips. Your devoted girlfriend, who happens to look devastatingly handsome in a suit. The Sterling Technologies building was a gleaming tower of steel and glass that dominated 3 city blocks. Avery had been there before for public events, but today felt different. Today she was walking into the heart of Vivian's empire as her partner, and the weight of that responsibility sat heavily on her shoulders. The boardroom was exactly what Avery had expected. Mahogany table, leather chairs, and portraits of distinguished old men staring down from the walls. 12 board members were already seated when Vivian and Avery entered, their conversations dying as all eyes turned to evaluate the couple. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vivian said, her voice carrying the authority that had made her one of the youngest CEOs in tech. "I'd like you to meet Aiden Parker." Avery shook hands around the table, maintaining eye contact and projecting the confidence that had become second nature. Over the past months, she recognized several faces from newspaper articles, titans of industry who controlled billions in assets and wielded power that could make or break careers with a single decision. Beatrice Langford gave Avery an encouraging nod from her seat near the head of the table. True to her word, she had been advocating for Vivian's relationship, but Avery could see other board members who looked less convinced. "Mr. Parker," said Daniel Cho, the board's longest-serving member, "we appreciate you joining us today. It's unusual for us to meet family members, but given the media attention your relationship has generated, we felt it was appropriate." Family members. The phrase hit Avery like a physical blow. These people saw her as Vivian's future, someone who would be part of Vivian's life permanently, someone who might influence her decisions, someone who could affect the company's future. "I'm honored to be here," Avery replied, taking the seat beside Vivian. "I know how important Sterling Technologies is to Vivian and by extension how important it is to me." The meeting proceeded with typical corporate efficiency: quarterly reports, budget approvals, strategic planning discussions. Avery found herself genuinely interested in Vivian's vision for the company's expansion into renewable energy, watching with admiration as Vivian commanded the room with intelligence and passion. It was during the discussion of a potential merger with a European firm that things took an unexpected turn. "The Brennan Group has expressed some concerns about our corporate stability," said Lena Morell, the chief financial officer. "Specifically, they've raised questions about recent changes in leadership's personal life." Vivian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "What kind of questions?" "They're wondering if your relationship might affect your commitment to the company," Daniel Cho said carefully. "There have been rumors that you might be considering stepping back from day-to-day operations, perhaps starting a family." The implication hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Avery felt her blood pressure rising as she realized what was happening. These people were using her relationship with Vivian as a weapon, suggesting that loving someone made Vivian less capable of leading. "Let me be very clear," Vivian said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "My personal life has never interfered with my professional responsibilities, and it never will. Aiden supports my career completely, and any suggestion otherwise is both insulting and inaccurate." "Of course," Lena said smoothly, "but you must understand the Brennan Group's perspective. They're investing in leadership they believe will be fully committed for the long term." Avery watched Vivian's face, seeing the flash of pain beneath her professional mask. This was exactly what Vivian had feared, that her relationship would be used against her, that loving someone would somehow make her appear weak or unfocused. "If I may," Avery said, standing up. Every eye in the room turned to her, and she felt the weight of Vivian's future resting on her shoulders. "I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding about what our relationship means for Vivian's career." The room was dead silent. Avery could feel Vivian's tension beside her, but she pressed on. "Vivian Sterling is the most dedicated professional I've ever met. She works 16-hour days because she believes in what she's building here. She turns down social invitations because she'd rather spend evenings reviewing research proposals. She's built this company into an industry leader because she's willing to sacrifice everything for it." Avery paused, looking around the table at faces that were now listening intently. But that level of dedication comes at a cost. It's exhausting to carry that much responsibility alone. "What I bring to Vivian's life isn't distraction, it's support. I'm not asking her to choose between her career and our relationship. I'm asking her to let me help her be even better at the job she was born to do." The silence stretched for long moments. Finally, Beatrice Langford spoke. "That's a very mature perspective, Mr. Parker." It's the only perspective that makes sense. Avery replied, I fell in love with Vivian partly because of her passion for this work. Why would I want to change that? Daniel Cho cleared his throat. And what about children? Marriage, the traditional expectations that come with serious relationships. Avery felt Vivian tense beside her. This was dangerous territory. They hadn't discussed these topics because their relationship was supposedly temporary. A 3-month arrangement that was now stretching into uncharted territory. Those decisions will be made together when, and if the time is right, Avery said carefully. But I can promise you this. Any family we build will be one that supports Vivian's career, not threatens it. She's changing the world with what she does here. I wouldn't dream of asking her to give that up. Another long silence. Then Lena Morell spoke. The Brennan Group also expressed concerns about discretion. High-profile relationships can be challenging to manage, which is exactly why we've been careful about our public appearances, Vivian said, finding her voice again. Aiden and I value our privacy, but we're also not ashamed of our relationship. We'll handle any media attention professionally as we always have. The discussion continued for another 20 minutes. But Avery could feel the shift in the room's energy. Beatrice's support, combined with Avery's passionate defense of Vivian's capabilities, had neutralized the worst of the concerns. When the meeting finally ended, several board members approached to congratulate Vivian on the quarterly results and to express their approval of Avery. Well handled, Daniel told Avery quietly. Vivian is lucky to have someone who understands the pressures of her position. As they left the building, Vivian was unusually quiet. It wasn't until they were safely in the back of their car that she spoke. That was incredible, she said, her voice thick with emotion. The way you defended me, the way you made them see. I just told them the truth. Avery said, you are extraordinary at what you do. Anyone who can't see that isn't paying attention. Vivian turned to face Avery fully, her eyes bright with unshed tears. But what you said about building a family that supports my career, did you mean that? The question hung between them, heavy with implications. They were talking about a future together, about permanent changes to both their lives. The 3-month contract that had brought them together was no longer relevant. They were discussing forever. Yes, Avery said simply. I meant every word. If that's what you want. Vivian's smile was radiant. It's what I want. It's what I've wanted since the night you told my parents you loved me. And I realized you actually meant it. Avery reached over to take Vivian's hand, intertwining their fingers. So, what happens now? Now we figure out how to build a real life together. Vivian said, no more contracts. No more pretending. Just us. As their car pulled into traffic, Avery reflected on how much had changed since that desperate morning, when she'd answered Vivian's classified ad. She had thought she was selling 3 months of her life for $50,000. Instead, she had found something infinitely more valuable: love, purpose, and a future she had never dared to imagine. The board meeting had been another test, another hurdle to overcome, but it had also been something more. It had been a declaration of their intentions, a public commitment to building something lasting together. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for the first time since this journey began, Avery felt completely confident about their ability to face whatever came next. They had chosen each other, and that choice was worth everything. 3 weeks after the board meeting, Avery and Vivian had settled into a routine that felt surprisingly natural. They spent most nights at Vivian's penthouse, and Avery had gradually moved her belongings there piece by piece. The media attention had died down to a manageable level with only occasional paparazzi photos and society page mentions. Everything seemed perfect, which was exactly why Avery should have known something was about to go terribly wrong. The call came on a Tuesday morning while Vivian was in the shower and Avery was making breakfast. The number was unlisted, but something compelled Avery to answer. Is this Avery Parker? The voice was unfamiliar, crisp, and professional. Avery's blood turned to ice. No one had called her Avery in months. Who is this? My name is Evan Lee. I'm an investigative journalist with the Financial Tribune. I'd like to ask you a few questions about your relationship with Vivian Sterling. Avery's hand tightened on the phone. I don't know what you're talking about, Ms. Parker. I have photographs of you from before your transformation. I have records from the salon where you cut your hair. Receipts from the stylist who taught you to dress like a man. I know who you really are. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Avery grabbed the kitchen counter to study herself, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. What do you want? I want your side of the story, Evan said. I'm publishing this article tomorrow morning with or without your comment. But I thought you might want the chance to explain why one of the most powerful women in business has been deceiving her shareholders, her board of directors, and the entire business community. Avery's mind raced frantically. Tomorrow morning, Vivian would be destroyed. Her career, her reputation, everything she had worked her entire life to build. How much? Avery asked desperately. I'm sorry. How much money do you want to kill the story? Evan's laugh was cold. Miss Parker, this isn't about money. This is about truth. The public has a right to know when they're being manipulated. Please, Avery whispered. You don't understand what this will do to her. I understand perfectly, Evan replied. Which is why I'm giving you 12 hours to decide if you want to comment. The story runs tomorrow at 6 a.m. The line went dead. Avery stood frozen in the kitchen, still holding the phone. When Vivian emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a towel, her hair damp and her face glowing with happiness. Who was that? Vivian asked, noticing Avery's pale complexion. Wrong number, Avery managed to say. Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Avery forced a smile. I'm fine, just tired. But she wasn't fine. For the rest of the day, Avery moved through their normal routine like a robot. She accompanied Vivian to lunch with investors, smiled, and played the role of the devoted boyfriend. But inside she was screaming. Every moment felt precious and fragile, like holding butterfly wings. Vivian noticed her distraction during dinner. You've been quiet today, she observed, reaching across the table to take Avery's hand. Is something wrong? Avery looked into those green eyes that had become her whole world and felt her heart breaking. Just thinking about how much I love you, she said, which was true, even if it wasn't the whole truth. Vivian's smile was radiant. I love you, too, more than I ever thought possible. That night, Avery lay awake listening to Vivian sleep beside her, memorizing the sound of her breathing, the way she curled into Avery's side, the soft sighs she made in her dreams. At 3 a.m., Avery carefully extracted herself from Vivian's arms and went to the living room to think. She could run. She could disappear before the story broke. Leave Vivian to deal with the aftermath alone. But that would make Vivian look like a victim of fraud, someone who had been deceived and used. It might actually help her reputation in some ways. Or she could stay and face the storm together. But that would mean Vivian's career would be destroyed along with her own life. There was a third option, one that made Avery's stomach turn, but seemed like the only way to protect Vivian completely. She could confess everything to Vivian now, tonight, and let Vivian decide how to handle it. At least then Vivian would have a few hours to prepare to get her legal team involved. To control the narrative, Avery was reaching for her phone to wake Vivian when she heard a key in the lock. Panic flooded through her. No one else had access to the penthouse. But then Vivian appeared in the doorway, fully dressed, her face pale and drawn. Vivian, what are you doing up? Where have you been? I got a call, Vivian said quietly. From my head of security. Someone's been asking questions about you, Aiden. About us. Avery's heart stopped. What kind of questions? The kind that could destroy everything, Vivian said, walking slowly into the living room. Evan Lee from the Financial Tribune. He knows Aiden. He knows everything. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Finally, Avery found her voice. How long have you known? I've suspected for weeks, Vivian admitted. Little things that didn't add up, but I didn't want to believe it. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid. Vivian, I can explain, can you? Vivian's voice was sharp with pain. Can you explain why you lied to me? Why you let me fall in love with a fiction? Avery stood up, desperate to bridge the distance between them. It wasn't fiction. My feelings for you, everything between us, that was real, was it? Vivian's eyes were bright with unshed tears. How can I believe anything you tell me now? How do I know what was real and what was part of the performance you were paid to give? Because you know me, Avery said desperately. You know who I am when we're alone together. That person is real, Vivian. Everything I feel for you is real. Vivian laughed bitterly. I don't even know your real name. Is it actually Avery? Yes, Avery whispered. That part was true. But you're not Aiden Parker from Northport who studied at Stanford. You're not the orphan tech entrepreneur who fell in love with me at first sight. You're someone I hired to pretend to be my boyfriend. And somewhere along the way, the lines got blurred. Each word hits him like a physical blow. The lines didn't get blurred, she said fiercely. I fell in love with you completely, desperately, hopelessly in love with you. That was never part of the act. How convenient, Vivian said coldly. The desperate art student who needed money fell in love with the millionaire. Forgive me if I'm having trouble believing in the purity of your motivations. Avery felt tears streaming down her face. That's not fair. You know that's not who I am, do I? Vivian turned away, staring out at the city lights. I thought I knew who you were. I thought I had found someone who loved me for myself, not for my money or my connections. But you've been lying to me from the very beginning. I wanted to tell you, Avery said desperately. So many times. I almost told you the truth. But I was scared of losing you. So instead, you let me fall deeper in love with a lie, Vivian said, her voice breaking. You let me bring you home to meet my parents. You let me defend our relationship to the board. The woman who loves you more than anything in this world. She exists. The woman who would do anything to protect you. She's real. Vivian finally turned around, and the pain in her eyes was devastating. But she's also the woman who's about to destroy everything I've worked for. When that story breaks tomorrow, it won't just be about you lying about your identity. It'll be about me lying to my board, to my shareholders, to everyone who trusted me. We can fight it, Avery said desperately. We can deny it or we can get ahead of the story. With what? Vivian interrupted. More lies. I'm done lying, Aiden. Or Avery. I don't even know what to call you anymore. The formal distance in Vivian's voice was worse than any anger could have been. Call me Avery, she whispered. Just Avery. That's who I really am. Vivian nodded slowly. Okay, Avery. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave tonight before the story breaks, and we're never going to see each other again. Vivian, please. It's the only way to minimize the damage. Vivian continued as if Avery hadn't spoken. I can claim I was deceived, too. That I was as much a victim as anyone else. My legal team thinks it might work. Avery felt like she was drowning. What about us? What about everything we built together? Vivian's smile was broken and bitter. We didn't build anything together, Avery. We built it on a foundation of lies. And now it's all coming down. The finality in Vivian's voice cut through Avery like a knife. This was really happening. After everything they had shared, all the real moments and genuine emotions, it was ending because of the lie that had brought them together in the first place. I love you, Avery said one last time, putting everything she felt into those 3 words. That was never a lie. Vivian's composure finally cracked, tears streaming down her face. I know, she whispered. That's what makes this so much worse. I love you, too, and I always will. But love isn't enough to fix this. As Avery gathered her few belongings, Vivian disappeared into the bedroom, unable to watch her leave. Avery stood at the door for a long moment, looking back at the penthouse that had briefly been home, at the life she was losing forever. I'm sorry, she whispered to the empty room. For everything. Then she walked out into the night, leaving behind the woman she loved and the future they would never have together. Tomorrow, the world would learn the truth about Aiden Parker and Vivian Sterling. But tonight, in the darkness of the city streets, Avery grieved for the love story that had been real in every way except the one that mattered most. If you enjoyed this content and want to support the channel in a special way, try clicking the thanks button below. It's the one with the heart and $ icon. With super thanks, you can make a direct contribution to the channel, which helps me keep creating awesome videos for you.